In communities across this nation, a devastating crisis is unfolding in plain sight, yet it remains shrouded in a deafening silence. Every single year, thousands of Black children vanish, and their faces are the ones you are least likely to see on your television screens. The numbers don't lie, and they paint a grim, undeniable picture of disparity. Black people make up around 14% of the U.S. population, but according to the FBI's National Crime Information Center, they account for a staggering 40% of all missing persons cases. This isn't a statistical anomaly. This is a systemic failure that exposes a painful truth about who we, as a society, deem worthy of our attention and resources. When a child goes missing, every second counts, but for Black children, the clock often ticks without the same urgency. The disparity becomes even more alarming when we focus specifically on our youth. In states like Ohio, the statistics are nothing short of a state of emergency. In 2022, Black children constituted an unbelievable 61% of all missing minors, even though they represent just 16% of the state's youth population. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't just about numbers on a page. It is about real children, real families, and real communities being torn apart. These are not isolated incidents, but a consistent pattern repeated in cities and towns all over America. The question we must force ourselves to answer is why this is happening. Why are our children disappearing at such a horrifying rate? And why does the response from those in power feel so muted and insufficient? This crisis is not a new phenomenon. It is a long-standing injustice that has been ignored for far too long by mainstream institutions. It's a reflection of deeper societal biases that devalue Black lives, rendering our pain and our fears invisible to the wider public. When a white child disappears, it often becomes a national news event, triggering widespread public outcry and mobilizing extensive search efforts. But when a Black child goes missing, the response is tragically different. The silence from major news networks and the slow mobilization of law enforcement resources send a clear and heartbreaking message to Black families. Your child's life does not matter as much. This is the brutal reality we are fighting against every single day. It is crucial for us to understand that this isn't just a problem for the Black community to solve alone. It is a profound American crisis that exposes the fractures in our social fabric. The safety and well-being of every child should be a national priority, regardless of their race or zip code. When one group of children is allowed to fall through the cracks at such a disproportionate rate, it signals a moral and ethical failing that affects us all. We must move beyond simply acknowledging the statistics and start demanding concrete action and accountability from the systems that are supposed to protect our most vulnerable citizens. The lives of our children depend on it, and we cannot afford to wait any longer. One of the most insidious barriers to finding missing Black children is the immediate and often baseless application of the runaway label by law enforcement. When a Black teenager is reported missing, the default assumption is too often that they left voluntarily, that they are troubled, or that they are involved in some kind of mischief. This classification is not just a simple word. It is a decision that carries devastating consequences. A child labeled as a runaway is typically disqualified from receiving an Amber Alert, the emergency broadcast system designed to galvanize an immediate large-scale search. This single action effectively shuts down the most critical tool for recovery in those vital first hours, leaving families to fend for themselves without the full force of the state behind them. This runaway narrative is rooted in deep-seated racial stereotypes that have plagued our communities for generations. It paints a picture of Black youth as inherently more defiant and less innocent than their white peers. This bias within law enforcement agencies leads to a dangerous lack of urgency, as cases are deprioritized and investigations are delayed or conducted with minimal effort. As survivor and advocate Alessandra De Romano pointed out in the tragic case of Keimani Latig, a young girl from Toledo found dead in March of this year, a more serious and dedicated response from the start could have changed the outcome. When authorities fail to see a missing Black child as a potential victim of abduction or trafficking, they are not just making a procedural error, they are failing in their fundamental duty to protect and serve. This systemic failure is compounded by a profound lack of media coverage, a phenomenon often referred to as missing white woman syndrome. The nation was rightly captivated and horrified by the disappearance of Gabby Petito, whose case dominated headlines for weeks, leading to a massive mobilization of resources that ultimately helped locate her. Yet, during that same period, countless Black men, women, and children were also missing, their stories untold and their families' pleas ignored by the same national media outlets. This disparity in coverage is not accidental. It is a deliberate editorial choice that signals which lives are considered newsworthy and which are not. This media blackout starves cases of the public attention needed to generate tips and maintain pressure on law enforcement. The consequences of this media neglect are severe and far-reaching. Without the spotlight of public attention, there are fewer community-led search parties, smaller reward funds, and less political pressure to keep a case active. For families, this silence is agonizing, adding another layer of trauma to an already unbearable situation. They are left to create their own flyers, manage their own social media campaigns, and beg local news outlets for a few seconds of airtime. Civil rights leaders like attorney Ben Crump have been vocal in calling out this injustice, demanding that newsrooms across the country confront their own biases and commit to equitable coverage for all missing persons, because every single missing child deserves a chance to be found. For the family of a missing child, every passing moment is filled with an indescribable mix of fear, dread, and desperate hope. This anguish is universal, cutting across all racial and economic lines. However, for Black families, this personal hell is magnified by the crushing weight of systemic indifference. Imagine the pain of reporting your child missing, only to be met with skepticism or dismissiveness from the very people sworn to help you. Imagine seeing your child's case relegated to a back burner, classified as a non-priority because of a prejudiced assumption that they simply ran away. This initial interaction with law enforcement often sets the tone for the entire ordeal, leaving families feeling alienated, disrespected, and utterly alone in their fight. This sense of isolation is intensified when they turn to the media for help, only to be met with a wall of silence. While stories of missing white children are broadcast on a loop, the pleas of Black parents often go unanswered. They watch the news and see other families receiving the full support of a concerned nation, while their own child's disappearance is treated as a local, insignificant event, if it's covered at all. This disparity sends a brutal message. Your grief is not as valid, your child is not as important. The psychological toll of this invisibility is immense, creating a prolonged trauma that lingers long after the initial crisis, compounding the grief with a deep sense of injustice and betrayal by the society that failed them. The burden of the search then falls almost entirely on the shoulders of the family and their immediate community. They become their own private investigators, their own public relations team, and their own crisis managers. They spend their days and nights printing and distributing flyers, organizing search parties with friends and neighbors, and tirelessly posting on social media, hoping that one share, one comment, might lead to a breakthrough. They navigate a complex and often unsympathetic system while grappling with the terror of not knowing where their child is or if they are safe. This is an exhausting, all-consuming effort, one that drains them emotionally, physically, and financially. all while the world seems to carry on as if nothing has happened. Ultimately, the lack of an official, robust response erodes trust in the institutions that are supposed to provide security and justice for all citizens. When Black families see the stark difference in how their cases are handled compared to others, it reinforces a painful, long-held belief that the system is not designed to protect them. They are left to wonder if a different response, an immediate Amber Alert, a dedicated task force, sustained media attention, could have brought their child home safely. This lingering question, this what if, is a heavy burden to carry, a constant and painful reminder of a system that saw their child as less than, and their family's pain as unworthy of a full and compassionate response. In the face of systemic neglect, the Black community has refused to remain silent. We are creating our own systems of support and demanding accountability. Leading this charge are tireless organizations like the Black and Missing Foundation, Inc., co-founded by Natalie Wilson. For years, BAMFI has been a critical lifeline for families, providing resources, raising awareness, and ensuring that the stories of our missing are not forgotten. They have partnered with groups like the Washington Association of Black Journalists to form a media task force, directly challenging newsrooms to provide fair and balanced coverage. This is grassroots advocacy at its finest, born from necessity and fueled by a relentless commitment to our people. This year, in 2025, we have seen the launch of a powerful new initiative, the Missing and Black 2025 campaign, driven by the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Federation of Black-owned newspapers. Under the leadership of Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr. and architect Carolyn Davis, this campaign is a direct response to media and law enforcement failures. It leverages the power of the Black press and harnesses the reach of respected voices like D.L. Hewley, Ricky Smiley, and myself to make daily mentions of missing Black individuals. We are using our own platforms, from radio shows to digital outlets like Black Press USA, to force these stories into the national consciousness, refusing to wait for mainstream media to validate our children's lives. This wave of advocacy is also beginning to create ripples in the halls of power, leading to promising legislative action. In Ohio, the tragic case of Keimani Lateef has inspired State Senator Paula Hicks Hudson to introduce Senate Bill 178. If passed, this bill, introduced just this past June, would establish a state task force specifically dedicated to addressing the disappearance and exploitation of Black, Indigenous, and other women and girls of color. This is a crucial step toward creating a targeted, systemic response to a crisis that has been ignored for far too long. It is proof that when we raise our voices, organize our communities, and demand change, we can begin to reshape the laws and policies that have failed us. While the statistics remain daunting and the fight is far from over, there is undeniable hope on the horizon. The change is being driven by us, by advocates, by journalists, by community leaders, and by every person who shares a post or a flyer. We are building the infrastructure of awareness and accountability that should have existed all along. The path forward requires that we continue to support organizations like BAMFI, amplify the work of the NNPA, and hold our elected officials and law enforcement agencies accountable. We must be the Amber Alert for our own children. Together, we can turn the tide, dismantle the systems of bias, and ensure that every missing child, regardless of their color, is given the urgent, comprehensive, and compassionate search they deserve.